The first pale light of dawn crept across the glass towers of downtown Seattle, casting long shadows between the buildings where Robert Chen's Tesla whispered to a stop. The Billionaire CEO stepped out, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pristine sidewalk as he approached the gleaming headquarters of Chen Technologies. Something caught his eye in the building's recessed doorway. A man sat upright against the brick wall, a worn backpack beside him and a thin jacket pulled tight despite the early summer morning. His hair was clean but needed cutting, his jeans faded but without holes. What struck Robert most was the man's posture. Even sleeping rough, he maintained a dignity that seemed almost military in its bearing. Marcus Thompson stirred as footsteps approached, his eyes opening with the alertness of someone who had learned to wake quickly. He saw expensive shoes first, then looked up into the face of a well-dressed Asian man who was studying him with curiosity rather than disgust. "Good morning," Robert said quietly. "Are you all right?" Marcus rose smoothly to his feet, brushing off his clothes with practiced efficiency. "I'm fine, thank you. Just waiting for my shift to start." "Your shift?" "I work nights here." "Maintenance." Marcus gestured toward the building with a slight smile. "I like to arrive early." Robert glanced at his watch. It was barely 6 in the morning. The overnight cleaning crew typically finished by 5. "You work for us?" "Yes, sir." Marcus Thompson. "I've been on the custodial team for about 3 months now." Something in the man's speech pattern caught Robert's attention. The grammar was precise, the vocabulary more sophisticated than he expected. And there was something about the way Marcus carried himself, a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. 3 months, Robert repeated. "And you sleep here because?" Marcus hesitated, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "It's temporary. I'm between places right now." The conversation was interrupted by the building's security guard unlocking the main entrance. "Morning, Mr. Chen," the guard called. "You're here early today." "Couldn't sleep," Robert replied, still watching Marcus. He noticed how the man had stepped slightly aside, as if making himself invisible was second nature. Marcus shouldered his backpack. "I should get started on the 6th floor restrooms." "Have a good day, Mr. Chen." As Marcus walked toward the employee entrance, Robert found himself wondering about the man's story. There had been something in his eyes, a sharp intelligence that seemed incongruous with his situation. But the demands of running a billion-dollar technology company quickly pushed the encounter from his mind. Inside the building, Marcus changed into his uniform and gathered his cleaning supplies. The 6th floor was his domain from 6 to 2, 8 hours of maintaining the pristine offices where Chen Technologies engineers designed the future. As he worked, Marcus couldn't help but notice the blueprints and technical drawings scattered across desks, the complex equations scrawled on whiteboards. His hands moved efficiently with the mop and cleaning cloths, but his mind was elsewhere, automatically processing the engineering problems he glimpsed in his peripheral vision. Old habits died hard, and despite everything that had happened, Marcus still thought like the aerospace engineer he had once been. By 2 in the afternoon, Marcus had finished his shift and was walking the 12 blocks to Maple Elementary School. The summer heat beat down on the sidewalk as he waited outside the red brick building, checking his phone for the time. At exactly 3:15, the doors burst open and children poured out like water through a dam. Emma Thompson emerged near the back of the crowd, her dark hair in pigtails and her backpack nearly as large as she was. At 8 years old, she had inherited her father's thoughtful brown eyes and his habit of observing everything around her with quiet intensity. "Daddy!" she called, running toward him with a gap-toothed grin. Marcus caught her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Good. Mrs. Rodriguez taught us about the solar system. Did you know that Mars has 2 moons?" Emma's voice carried the excitement of new discovery. "I did know that," Marcus said, setting her down. "What are their names?" Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "Phobos and Deimos." "Very good. You're going to be a scientist someday. They walked hand in hand toward Mrs. Garcia's house, a small bungalow where Emma spent her afternoons while Marcus slept. The elderly woman had become their lifeline when Marcus lost his apartment, offering to watch Emma for what little he could afford to pay. Mrs. Garcia greeted them at the door with warm eyes and flour-dusted hands. "She's been an angel today," she told Marcus in accented English. "Did her homework and helped me bake cookies." Marcus felt the familiar weight of gratitude mixed with shame. He was a grown man relying on the kindness of a 70-year-old woman who lived on Social Security. "Thank you, Mrs. Garcia. I can't tell you how much this means to us. You're a good father, Marcus. Emma is lucky to have you." As they said goodbye, Emma tugged on Marcus's hand. "Daddy, why do you sleep outside instead of with me at Mrs. Garcia's?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "Because grown-ups need their own space, baby. And Mrs. Garcia's house is just right for you. But wouldn't it be better if we had our own place again?" Marcus knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We will, Emma. I promise. Daddy's working very hard to make that happen." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. He wasn't just working hard, he was working brilliantly, but in a job that barely paid enough for Emma's care and school supplies. Every night he cleaned offices filled with engineering projects that he could solve in his sleep, yet he remained invisible to the very people who desperately needed his expertise. The next morning brought chaos to the 32nd floor of Chen Technologies. Robert Chen stood in the center of the engineering department's main conference room, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of strain as he studied the wall-mounted displays showing their latest project. The Aurora satellite system represented 3 years of development and $200 million in investment. Designed to provide global internet coverage to underserved regions, it was scheduled for launch in 6 weeks. But the structural analysis had revealed a critical flaw that threatened to destroy everything. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the project's lead engineer, pointed to the stress distribution models on the largest screen. "The antenna array is creating resonance frequencies that will tear the satellite apart during orbital insertion. We've run the calculations dozens of times. What are our options?" Robert asked, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "We can redesign the entire support structure, but that means delaying launch by at least 8 months. Or we can try to dampen the resonance with additional materials, but that adds weight we can't afford." 8 months would kill us, Robert said quietly. "The FCC approval window closes, and our competitors will have first-mover advantage. We'd lose everything." The room fell silent except for the hum of computers running endless simulations. 23 of the company's brightest engineers had been working around the clock for 2 weeks, and they were no closer to a solution. "Keep working," Robert said finally. "There has to be an answer." As the meeting dispersed, Robert walked to his corner office, feeling the weight of impending failure. Chen Technologies had built its reputation on innovative solutions to impossible problems. The Aurora project was supposed to be their crowning achievement, bringing internet access to rural communities across 3 continents. 24 floors below, Marcus began his evening routine, starting with the executive washrooms on the 32nd floor. As he worked, he could hear fragments of conversation from the engineering department. The words antenna resonance and structural failure drifted through the air conditioning vents. Despite himself, Marcus found his attention drawn to the open conference room where whiteboards were covered with equations and stress analysis charts. His trained eye immediately recognized the problem they were grappling with. It was a classic case of dynamic coupling between flexible structures, something he had encountered during his work on NASA's solar array systems. The solution was actually elegant in its simplicity, requiring a modification to the antenna mounting points that would shift the resonance frequency outside the problematic range. But Marcus forced himself to look away and continue mopping. He was the night janitor, invisible and irrelevant to the brilliant mind struggling with problems he had solved years ago. 3 days later, Marcus sat on a park bench with Emma, sharing a sandwich he had bought with his lunch money. The September air carried the first hint of autumn's chill, and Marcus pulled his jacket tighter as he watched his daughter feed breadcrumbs to the pigeons. "Daddy," Emma said without looking up from the birds, "Mrs. Rodriguez says winter comes early in Seattle. Will we have a warm place by then?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Of course we will, sweetheart. Daddy's working on it." But Emma's innocent question haunted him as they walked back to Mrs. Garcia's house. The elderly woman met them at the door with worried eyes and a folded piece of paper in her hand. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "My landlord came by today. He's raising the rent, and I can barely afford what I'm paying now." The implications hung in the air between them. Mrs. Garcia couldn't afford to watch Emma for the pittance Marcus paid her, not if her own housing costs were increasing. "How much time do we have?" Marcus asked quietly. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I told him I needed to talk to you first." That night, Marcus returned to Chen Technologies with the weight of desperation pressing down on his shoulders. As he cleaned the 32nd floor, he could see that the engineering crisis was deepening. The whiteboards now showed increasingly complex calculations, and the coffee cups scattered around the conference room suggested the team was working late into the night. Dr. Mitchell was still there at midnight, staring at her computer screen with exhausted eyes. She looked up as Marcus emptied her wastebasket. "Long night?" Marcus asked gently. She laughed without humor. "Long month. We're running out of time and ideas. The launch window is in 5 weeks, and we still can't solve this resonance problem." Marcus nodded sympathetically and continued his work, but his mind was racing. 5 weeks for them, 3 weeks for him. Both deadlines carrying the weight of catastrophic failure. As he moved through the empty offices, Marcus found himself stopping at the conference room whiteboards again. The equations were more complex now, but still pursuing the wrong approach. They were trying to eliminate the resonance instead of managing it, like trying to stop the ocean instead of learning to surf the waves. His hand reached unconsciously toward an abandoned marker, then stopped. Who was he to think he could solve what 23 brilliant engineers couldn't? He was Marcus Thompson, single father and night janitor, not Dr. Marcus Thompson, aerospace engineer with patents in structural dynamics. But as he stood there in the fluorescent-lit silence, watching the city lights twinkle beyond the windows, Marcus felt something stirring inside him that had been dormant for months. It wasn't just professional pride or intellectual curiosity. It was the desperate realization that sometimes survival required taking risks that terrified you. The breakthrough came at 2 in the morning on a Thursday. Marcus was cleaning the conference room when he noticed fresh calculations on the whiteboard, still wet with red marker. Dr. Mitchell had been working on harmonic dampening equations, but she was approaching the problem from the wrong direction entirely. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and stared at the board. The numbers told a story of brilliant minds hitting a wall, of complex solutions chasing a simple problem. He thought about Emma asking about winter shelter, about Mrs. Garcia's worried face, about the 3 weeks that stood between them and disaster. Without allowing himself to think, Marcus picked up a blue marker. His hand moved across the whiteboard with practiced precision, sketching a modified antenna configuration that would redistribute the stress loads. Below it, he wrote the resonance frequency calculations, showing how the new design would shift the problematic harmonics outside the danger zone. The mathematics flowed from his memory like a forgotten language suddenly recalled. Structural dynamics, modal analysis, frequency response functions. This was who he had been before layoffs and desperation stripped away everything except his love for Emma. When he finished, Marcus stepped back and looked at what he had created. The solution was elegant, practical, and would require minimal modifications to the existing design. It would work. He knew it would work because he had solved identical problems for NASA's International Space Station solar arrays. But now what? He couldn't simply leave it there and hope someone would notice. The night shift security cameras would show him writing on the board, and he would be fired for vandalism or corporate espionage. Yet he couldn't bring himself to erase the work either. Marcus compromised by taking a photo with his phone, then wiping the board clean. He would find another way to share the solution, somehow. The next morning, Jennifer Walsh arrived early for her shift as day maintenance supervisor. She had worked at Chen Technologies for 5 years and prided herself on knowing every member of her team. Marcus Thompson was different from the others, and she had noticed things about him that didn't quite fit the profile of a typical janitor. There was the way he carried himself, the precise way he spoke, and the fact that she had seen him reading advanced engineering journals during his breaks. Most telling of all was the incident 2 weeks ago when she had found him in the supply closet, sketching complex diagrams on the back of inventory sheets. What would you do if you discovered hidden genius in an unexpected place? Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, working quietly beside us while carrying secrets that could change everything. Share your thoughts from wherever you're watching, because stories like this remind us that talent and brilliance can emerge from the most surprising circumstances. As Jennifer made her rounds that Thursday morning, she decided it was time to pay closer attention to Marcus Thompson. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. At 10:30, Jennifer was restocking supplies in the 32nd floor storage closet when she heard Dr. Mitchell's frustrated voice echoing from the conference room. The engineering team was arguing about yet another failed approach to the antenna problem. Jennifer glanced around the corner and saw Marcus methodically emptying trash bins near the conference room. He moved with his usual quiet efficiency, but she noticed something different in his posture. There was a tension in his shoulders, and his eyes kept drifting toward the white boards covered with equations. When Marcus stepped into the supply closet to refill his cleaning cart, Jennifer was waiting for him. "Marcus," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, wariness flickering across his features. "Of course, Ms. Walsh. Those engineering journals you read during breaks. And the sketches I found last week." Jennifer paused, studying his face. "You understand what they're working on up there, don't you?" Marcus's hands stilled on the paper towel packages. "I don't know what you mean." But his denial lacked conviction, and Jennifer pressed forward. "My brother is a mechanical engineer. I recognize the look you get when you're studying those whiteboards. It's not curiosity, Marcus. It's comprehension." For a long moment, they stared at each other in the fluorescent-lit closet. Finally, Marcus sighed and leaned against the metal shelving. "It doesn't matter what I understand," he said quietly. "I'm the night janitor. Nobody's going to listen to cleaning staff about satellite engineering." Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. "This morning I found this stuck under your cleaning cart. It must have fallen out of your supplies." Marcus's breath caught. It was the photo he had taken of his whiteboard solution, somehow transferred to a piece of paper that had gotten caught in his cart wheels. The equations and antenna modifications were clearly visible. "You solved it, didn't you?" Jennifer whispered. "The problem that's been driving them crazy for weeks. You actually solved it." Marcus looked at the paper with a mixture of pride and terror. His secret was out, at least partially. But instead of the relief he expected to feel, there was only fear. Fear of being exposed as a fraud, fear of losing the only job that let him stay close to Emma, fear of hoping for something better only to have it destroyed again. "I used to work in aerospace," he admitted finally. "A long time ago. Before Emma, before everything fell apart." Jennifer studied the solution with growing amazement. "This isn't just understanding, Marcus. This is brilliance. You need to show this to Dr. Mitchell." "I can't," Marcus said, shaking his head. "You don't understand. I'm nobody here. If I suddenly claim to be some kind of expert, they'll think I'm lying or crazy. And then I'll lose this job, and Emma and I will have nothing." But Jennifer was already thinking ahead, seeing possibilities that Marcus was too frightened to consider. What if there was a way to share your knowledge without risking everything? What if we could find a path that protected both you and Emma while giving the company what it desperately needs? That afternoon, Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. She knocked on Dr. Mitchell's office door, holding Marcus's solution in her hands. "Sarah, I know this sounds strange, but I think I found something that might help with the Aurora project." Dr. Mitchell looked up from her computer with tired eyes. "Jennifer, I appreciate the thought, but unless you've got a PhD in structural engineering hidden somewhere, I don't think." "Just look at this," Jennifer interrupted, placing the paper on the desk. "Someone left this in the maintenance area. I think it might be important." Dr. Mitchell glanced at the equations with the polite attention she might give a child's drawing, but her expression changed as she began to process what she was seeing. Her eyes widened, and she reached for a calculator. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice sharp with sudden focus. "I told you, I found it in the maintenance area. Someone must have dropped it." Dr. Mitchell was already at her whiteboard, recreating the calculations with rapid, precise strokes. The mathematics were elegant, the approach completely different from anything her team had considered. Instead of fighting the resonance, this solution embraced it and redirected it. "This is brilliant," she whispered. "Whoever wrote this understands dynamic systems at a level that—" "Jennifer, are you absolutely sure you don't know who created this?" Jennifer felt the weight of Marcus's trust. She had promised to protect him, but she also saw the desperate hope in Dr. Mitchell's eyes. "Maybe," she said carefully, "if you implemented this solution, the person who wrote it might be willing to come forward. If they felt safe." Dr. Mitchell was already calling Robert Chen. "Have you ever had to swallow your pride for your family? Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to step forward when everything inside you wants to hide. Life often asks us to choose between safety and possibility, between the known struggle and the unknown hope." Let us know where you're listening from as we explore these moments that change everything. Within an hour, the engineering team was implementing Marcus's solution. The antenna modifications were precise, practical, and required only minor changes to the existing design. Computer simulations confirmed what Marcus had known instinctively: the resonance frequencies were shifted outside the danger zone. But as the celebration began in the conference room, Marcus was finishing his shift 24 floors below, unaware that his secret had been revealed. When Jennifer finally found him preparing to leave the building, her face carried both excitement and worry. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something. And you're going to have to decide whether to trust me completely, or run as fast as you can." Marcus felt his world shift beneath his feet as Jennifer explained what she had done. His solution was being implemented by the engineering team at that very moment. Dr. Mitchell was calling it revolutionary. Robert Chen was asking questions about the mysterious genius who had solved their impossible problem. "You had no right," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "You promised to protect me, and instead you exposed me." "I protected your identity," Jennifer replied firmly. "But Marcus, they're desperate for answers, and you have them. This could change everything for you and Emma. Or it could destroy us," Marcus shot back. "Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything once? To have people look at you like you're worthless? I can't go through that again, especially not with Emma depending on me." But Jennifer pressed on. "Your solution is saving their company, Marcus. Right now, upstairs, they're preparing to contact NASA to verify the calculations. When they do, they're going to realize this work comes from someone with serious aerospace experience." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in. His carefully constructed invisibility was crumbling, and he had no control over what came next. In 2 weeks, Emma would lose her childcare. In 5 weeks, winter would arrive. And now, his only source of income was threatened by the very expertise that might save them. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You don't have time," Jennifer replied gently. "Dr. Mitchell wants to meet with whoever created this solution tomorrow morning. If you don't come forward, they'll start investigating. They'll check security footage, interview staff, run background checks on anyone with access to that floor." The next morning, Marcus sat on a bench outside Chen Technologies, watching employees stream into the building. Emma was beside him, swinging her legs and chattering about her upcoming school science fair. She had no idea that her father was about to make a decision that would either lift them out of poverty or cost him his job entirely. "Daddy, why aren't you going to work?" Emma asked, noticing his hesitation. Marcus looked down at his daughter's trusting face. She believed in him completely, without question or doubt. She had never seen him as anything less than her hero, even when they were sleeping in doorways and eating sandwiches for dinner. "Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups have to make very hard choices. And sometimes we have to be brave even when we're scared." "Are you scared, Daddy?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "But I'm more scared of not trying than I am of failing." He stood up, took Emma's hand, and walked toward the building where his future waited. At the security desk, he asked the guard to call Jennifer Walsh. When she appeared, her face showed both relief and concern. "I need you to take Emma to Mrs. Garcia's," Marcus said quietly. "Then I need you to tell Dr. Mitchell that the person who solved their problem is ready to meet with them. But first," he knelt down to Emma's level. "I need you to remember something very important, baby. No matter what happens today, Daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky. And sometimes love means taking risks to make things better." As Jennifer led Emma away, Marcus straightened his shoulders and walked toward the elevator that would carry him to the 32nd floor, to Robert Chen's office, and to whatever future awaited them both. The conference room fell silent when Marcus walked through the door. Robert Chen sat at the head of the polished table, flanked by Dr. Mitchell and 3 other senior engineers. Their faces showed confusion as they recognized the night janitor who had cleaned their offices for months. "Mr. Thompson," Robert said carefully, "Jennifer tells us you have information about the Aurora project solution." Marcus remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that suddenly seemed more military than subservient. "I wrote the solution you implemented yesterday," he said quietly. "The antenna modification equations, the resonance frequency calculations. All of it." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding social protocol. "The mathematics in that solution require advanced knowledge of structural dynamics and modal analysis." "Where did you learn aerospace engineering?" "NASA Goddard Space Flight Center," Marcus replied. "I was a senior structural engineer on the International Space Station Solar Array project for 8 years. Before that, I held a doctorate in aerospace engineering from MIT." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but Robert raised his hand for silence. His eyes never left Marcus's face as he processed this revelation. "Dr. Marcus Thompson," Robert said slowly. "I remember that name. You co-authored the paper on deployable space structures that revolutionized satellite design. You hold 17 patents in structural engineering." 18, Marcus corrected quietly. "The last one was filed 3 days before I was laid off during the 2023 budget cuts." The weight of Marcus's fall from prestigious engineer to invisible janitor settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Dr. Mitchell stared at him with a mixture of awe and horror, realizing she had been working alongside one of the field's leading experts without ever knowing it. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. Marcus's composure finally cracked, years of suppressed frustration and humiliation spilling out. "Tell you what? That I used to matter? That I once designed systems that are still orbiting the Earth? Would you have believed the janitor who empties your trash cans?" Robert stood up slowly, his businessman's mind already calculating the implications. "You've been watching us struggle with problems you could solve in your sleep. For months, you've been invisible in plain sight." "I needed the job," Marcus said simply. "My daughter Emma needs stability, food, shelter. I couldn't risk being seen as crazy or delusional. Former engineers become janitors because no one else will hire them. We're damaged goods in this industry." "But your solution saved our project," Dr. Mitchell said. "It's brilliant, elegant, and it works perfectly. We've already run full simulations." Marcus nodded. "Dynamic coupling in deployable structures was my specialty at NASA. The Aurora antenna configuration is nearly identical to the ISS solar array systems I helped design. The solution was obvious to me because I've solved this exact problem before. Robert walked to the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline while processing everything he had learned. When he turned back, his expression had shifted from shock to something approaching reverence. "Dr. Thompson," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. This company owes you far more than an apology. You've been working beneath your abilities, invisible to people who desperately needed your expertise. That ends today." Marcus felt something inside his chest that he had not experienced in months. It might have been hope, or it might have been terror. In this moment, he could not tell the difference between the two. Within 2 hours, Marcus's life had been completely transformed. Robert Chen didn't just offer him a senior engineering position, he insisted on personally handling the transition. The first call was to human resources to expedite Marcus's official hiring process. The second was to corporate housing to arrange immediate temporary accommodation for Marcus and Emma. But it was the third call that broke Marcus's carefully maintained composure. Robert dialed his personal assistant while Marcus sat in stunned silence. "Susan, I need you to contact Evergreen Elementary and let them know that Emma Thompson will need to be picked up by a company car today. Her father has just joined our senior engineering team, and we're helping with the transition. Yes, arrange for her to stay in our executive childcare center until Dr. Thompson finishes his first day." The simple dignity of that gesture, treating Emma not as an inconvenience but as a priority, nearly brought Marcus to tears. For months, he had carried the weight of her care alone, always worried about her safety and happiness. Now, suddenly, there were resources and support systems he had forgotten could exist. Dr. Mitchell approached him as the meeting concluded. "I want to apologize, Marcus. I've walked past you hundreds of times, and I never really saw you. I never imagined that someone with your credentials could be working in maintenance." "You weren't supposed to see me," Marcus replied. That was the point. Invisible people don't get questioned about their qualifications or their past. They just get ignored, which felt safer than being rejected. But Robert wasn't finished making amends. He gathered the entire engineering team for an emergency meeting, where he introduced Dr. Marcus Thompson as their new senior structural engineer and the man who had solved the Aurora crisis. The response was electric. Engineers who had treated Marcus as furniture for months suddenly saw him as the expert colleague he had always been. Questions flew about his NASA experience, his patents, his insights into ongoing projects. Marcus found himself sketching solutions to problems that had been frustrating the team for weeks. His years of experience with space-based systems provided perspectives they had never considered. The energy in the room was infectious, the kind of collaborative excitement that made engineering feel like magic rather than work. What hidden talents might the people around you possess? Every day, we pass by individuals whose stories could amaze us, whose abilities could inspire us, whose wisdom could change our perspective entirely. The person cleaning your office, serving your coffee, or checking your groceries might be carrying experiences and knowledge that could reshape your understanding of what's possible. Share your thoughts and subscribe for more inspiring stories, because recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary is one of humanity's greatest gifts. As the day wound down, Marcus stood in his new office, which still felt surreal. Through the window, he could see Emma in the childcare center below, happily playing with other children. For the first time in months, she looked completely carefree. Jennifer appeared in his doorway with a smile that lit up her entire face. "So, Dr. Thompson, how does it feel to be visible again?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "It's terrifying," he admitted. "But it's also the first time in months that I feel like I might be able to give Emma the life she deserves." That night, Marcus and Emma walked into a furnished corporate apartment with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. Emma ran from room to room with pure joy, finally able to be a child instead of worrying about where they would sleep. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood before the Aurora satellite mission's final review board. Representatives from NASA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and 3 international space agencies filled the conference room. The project that had nearly died was now being hailed as revolutionary. Dr. Thompson's structural modifications have exceeded all performance expectations, Dr. Mitchell announced to the assembled officials. The resonance dampening system not only solves our original problem but actually improves overall satellite stability by 37%. Marcus stepped forward with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally found his place again. The antenna array modifications draw on principles I developed for the International Space Station solar deployment systems, he explained. By embracing the natural frequency characteristics rather than fighting them, we create a self-stabilizing structure that becomes stronger under stress. A NASA representative leaned forward with obvious interest. Dr. Thompson, we've reviewed your previous work. Your innovations in deployable space structures were instrumental in extending the ISS mission life. Having you back in the field is a significant development for the entire aerospace community. The validation felt surreal. Marcus had spent months believing his career was over, that his expertise had become worthless. Now he was addressing the same agencies that had once sought his consultation, treated again as the expert he had never stopped being. But the real transformation became clear during the technical presentation. As Marcus explained the mathematical principles behind his solution, his colleagues watched with growing admiration. This wasn't just problem-solving, it was artistry expressed through engineering precision. Robert Chen observed from the back of the room, remembering the man he had found sleeping in his building's doorway just weeks earlier. The journey from invisible janitor to celebrated engineer seemed impossible, yet here was the proof that human potential could never be truly measured by circumstances. The review board's approval was unanimous. Aurora would launch on schedule, carrying internet connectivity to underserved regions across 3 continents. But more than that, it would carry the story of Marcus Thompson, proof that brilliance could survive even the darkest circumstances. After the meeting, Marcus found himself alone with Robert in the executive conference room. The Billionaire CEO looked out at the Seattle skyline with an expression of deep thoughtfulness. "I keep thinking about all the other people out there like you," Robert said quietly. "Brilliant minds trapped in invisible jobs, their talents wasted because we never bothered to really see them." Marcus nodded. The aerospace industry is full of laid-off engineers driving for rideshare companies, teaching high school, working retail. We're everywhere, but we've learned to become invisible because visibility often means rejection. Robert turned to face him. "That's going to change. I want you to head up a new initiative, Marcus. We're going to create pathways for overlooked talent, partnerships with organizations that serve displaced professionals. Your story shouldn't be unusual, it should be the beginning of something bigger." As they shook hands, Marcus realized that his transformation was complete not just in terms of employment, but in purpose. He had gone from protecting only Emma to potentially helping thousands of people whose talents had been overlooked by a system too busy to see their worth. That evening, Marcus sat on his apartment balcony with Emma beside him, both of them watching the lights of Seattle twinkle below. The little girl who had worried about winter shelter was now planning her science fair project on satellite communications, inspired by her father's work. 6 months after that first morning when Robert Chen found Marcus sleeping in a doorway, the Aurora satellite constellation was operational across 3 continents. In remote villages in Kenya, children were accessing online education for the first time. In rural Peru, farmers were connecting with global markets through internet commerce. The project that had nearly failed was now changing lives around the world. Marcus stood in his corner office at Chen Technologies, reviewing applications for the Second Chances initiative he now directed. The program had already placed 47 overlooked professionals in positions that matched their expertise. Former doctors were practicing medicine again, displaced teachers were back in classrooms, and engineers like himself were designing the future. Emma burst through his office door with the excitement that only 80-year-olds could generate. "Daddy! Mrs. Rodriguez says my satellite project won first place at the district science fair." Marcus swept her into a hug that lifted her off the ground. "That's because you have the most brilliant scientific mind in the 3rd grade," he said, spinning her around until she giggled. "And because I have the best daddy who knows about space stuff," Emma added with the pure logic of childhood. The simple truth of her statement struck Marcus profoundly. For months, he had believed his worth was tied to his job title, his salary, his professional recognition. But Emma had always seen him as brilliant, capable, and worthy of respect, even when he was sleeping on the streets and cleaning office buildings. Robert Chen appeared in the doorway with a smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I have some news that might interest both of you." He handed Marcus an official-looking document with NASA letterhead. "The International Space Station program has requested your consultation on their next-generation solar array upgrade. They specifically asked for Dr. Marcus Thompson, the engineer who revolutionized deployable satellite structures." Marcus stared at the letter with wonder. NASA wanted him back, not as a desperate job applicant but as a sought-after expert. The career he thought had ended was beginning again, stronger than before. But it was Emma's reaction that mattered most. She looked at the NASA logo with wide eyes and whispered, "Daddy, you're going to help astronauts?" "I'm going to try, sweetheart. Just like you're going to be a scientist someday and help even more people than Daddy ever could." That night, Marcus tucked Emma into her own bed in their permanent apartment. The corporate housing had become a company benefit, part of his senior engineer compensation package. For the first time in over a year, neither of them had to worry about where they would sleep. As he turned off her light, Emma called out sleepily, "Daddy, remember when we used to look at stars through that scary window at Mrs. Garcia's house?" "I remember, baby. Now we can see them from our own window. And someday, when you help build new satellites, I'll look up and know my daddy put something beautiful in the sky." Marcus stood in her doorway, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. From invisible janitor to recognized engineer, from sleeping rough to building the future, from desperation to hope. If this story touched your heart, please share where you're listening from and help us build this community of hope. Every person carries hidden potential, every struggle can lead to transformation, and every act of recognition can change a life. Thank you for being part of this journey with Marcus and Emma, and remember that the extraordinary often hides in the ordinary, waiting for someone to simply see what was always there. The Aurora satellites continued their silent orbits overhead, carrying the dreams of a single father who refused to give up and the love of a daughter who never stopped believing in her hero.